27 years into our democracy and 25 years since the adoption of South Africa's constitution, so-called Muslim marriages still don't receive full recognition under South African law. This leaves women and children from Muslim marriages vulnerable upon dissolution of such unions, either by death or divorce. The Constitutional Court will today provide some kind of finality on the state's obligation to recognize Muslim marriages when it hears the Women's League Center versus the President case at 10 o'clock. For more on what to expect, let's bring in the Women's League Center Director, that's Seeham Samai, who joins us via our video link. Seeham, great to chat to you again. Welcome back to the AM Report. So help us understand this. On what basis were Muslim marriages not recognized in this country, in a context where I think it's Section 9 of the Constitution is very clear about everyone deserving equal protection under the law?
Yes, good morning. Yes, it's been a very long road for the Women's Legal Center and the women who have sought a recognition of the marriages for over 20 years. And the Constitutional Court, as you've indicated, is the highest court in the country, and they will decide on the issue of a recognition and provide some form of legal certainty at what on what the women's legal submissions will be, and which will be today, and that the state has a constitutional obligation, but a positive obligation to enact legislation. So your main reason for non-recognition is because there isn't a broader legislative framework to be able to ensure that women who are married in terms of Muslim rights only and gets divorced, or upon the dissolution of their marriage because of death, does not have the same protection.
Is that framework now in place?
That framework is not in place. What we do have is that over the years that the court have come to the aid of women, and what we call is a piecemeal approach, whereas there are certain provisions in our law that broad protection have been given in terms of the meaning of spouse, which includes Muslim spouses, like the Intestate Succession Act, Maintenance of Surviving Spouses Act, the Wills Act, etc. All have some form of legislative the protection. However, broadly, there isn't a legislative framework. There is no law that protects Muslim marriages after the dissolution of that marriage.
Okay. I'm hoping we're not leaving anyone behind here. So initially, the sticking point was that there's no legal framework, and that's why there was non-recognition. That framework is still in place. On what basis, then, are we hoping for some kind of positive outcome from the Constitutional Court today?
Well, the issue of recognition is critical because it's important, because there will be legal certainty, but also it attaches to the obligations in relation to marriage. So we are saying that there will then be a broad framework where women can firstly recognize their marriages, and secondly, that there's a recourse in relation to the rights of housing, the rights of land, the rights of property, the broader economic of the estate after the dissolution. What is the recourse for women at the end of the day?
Right.
So today we wanted to make sure that the Constitutional Court understands the importance also of the interim relief that we are asking, because we're saying that even though the state has come up with some form of process of law reform through the Green Paper as well as the Single Marriages Discussion Paper, it will take up to 2024 before some form of broader recognition, not recognition, but at least legal certainty is given. And what we are saying is that women will be able to use the Divorce Act in the interim to be able to ensure that there is some form of protection within the marriage.
Gotcha.
And that they have recourse in that particular marriage.
Right. So in the current form, the status quo as it stands, there is no kind of recourse specifically for women and children. In what ways does that leave them vulnerable in the context of a death or a divorce within a Muslim marriage?
Well, it places them extremely vulnerable because we know that after the dissolution of the marriage, more times than not, the properties, etc., is to the name of the husband. And what does that mean? It leaves women disillusioned, it leaves women out in the cold, and we need to be able to ensure how is it that we will be able to ensure that there's equality and equity in relation to the division of the estate after the dissolution of that particular marriage, so that we know that women and children are taken care of at the end of the day.
All right. There is also the Muslim Marriages Bill. Help us place where that piece of legislation falls in our discussion, if in any way at all.
Well, currently the Muslim Marriages Bill is currently not before the court. Also, it is not even before cabinet. In 2010, that was the last in terms of the discussion that was made in terms of the Muslim Marriages Bill. And we are not saying that the Muslim Marriages Bill is going to be this legislative framework. We are saying that it's up to the state to decide what broadly they want to bring in terms of this legislative framework.
So if the outcome today is not what we had imagined from the Constitutional Court, in other words, if they don't grant you at least that interim relief to be able to look out for specifically women in Muslim marriages as well as the children there, what other steps, if any, can the Women's Legal Center actually take?
Well, as I've said before, the Constitutional Court is actually the highest court in the country.
Right.
And they will decide the issue of recognition, and this is the final court. So this is the end of the road for us. And we hope that the court will bring in a positive judgment to ensure that it recognizes that there's diversity and respects and promotes the rights of the most vulnerable.
As far as you're concerned, is that kind of judgment a far-gone conclusion? I mean, I know what you're hoping for, but is there any reason why the court wouldn't grant that, given the issues we've just ventilated?
Well, the state doesn't believe that there's an obligation on them or positive obligation. They acknowledge that there is discrimination, and that was done in the Supreme Court of Appeal, that there is broad discrimination in relation to women. However, they don't believe that there is a positive obligation on them to be able to enact the legislation. And I think that is where the state or the courts will also have to be able to look at what are the issues around what they would term the separation of powers, and whether or not the Women's Legal Center will be able to tell the court to be able to bring in legislation, and whether or not that is actually a provision which is in Section 15 of the Constitution. But that is going to be the main contention of interpretation, which includes also the issue around the interim relief.
Yeah, no overstating. There's a lot at stake. Thanks very much indeed for helping us understand some of the complexities around this matter. 10 o'clock is when that kind of finality is set to be delivered. Hopefully we'll be able to bring it to our audience as it happens. For now, let me thank you for your time. Seeham Samai is the director at the Women's League Center. Once again, thanks very much indeed.